Sorry, Greg.
You're fine.
Oh, technology.
And you might want to make me co-host.
That drops.
Put pressure on.
I
just saw him. He's always on the cruise.
Yeah.
Okay, we're streaming.
Okay.
And thanks for making me co-host.
You're welcome.
I have to go to scooter.
And did you try going to the Grove?
Yeah.
They have a,
Zone
they have
restriction.
a zone restriction on the Grove, so go around it when you go last year.
Yeah, so you can only go like 5 miles an hour, which like you can walk faster.
Pedestrians for passing. Is that what you're saying?
Just like push.
When I had that same thing. Why stop?
You feel weird on a regular scooter, you're going super slow and you're like, oh.
Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to our April board meeting. Carrie, would you please do roll call for us? Sure. Galavis? Here. Plenty?
Here.
Magnuson?
Here.
Pantera? Here. Westonsko? Here. All board members present. All right, thank you, Carrie. Well, good morning. Welcome to our board meeting today. It's so nice to see it. My first time in a long time seeing everyone's faces. So thank you to all that are in the room today. Thanks to everyone that's also joining us remotely this morning as well. It's a good day to be back in the library. All right, we have no introductions today, so I'm going to go ahead and jump to communications, which are none this morning. However, we do have the consent items for the bills, payment of bills and payroll and financial report. Oh, I did. As my esteemed library director pointed out, I'm trying to go off the agenda as well as this little step-by-step, and so I flew right past the meeting minutes. So with that, I will look to my fellow board members. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes that were submitted?
I reviewed the minutes and believe they accurately reflect the last meeting, and I propose or move that we approve the minutes.
Wonderful. Thank you, Brian. Do I have a second? A second. Thank you, Nikki. All board members, do we approve? Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you so much for that. All right, now I'm really going to move on to the consent agenda for the payment of bills and payroll and the financial report. So I will entertain from our fellow board if we have an approval.
I had a couple of questions about the financial report. Is now the appropriate time, or I noted that we're 41.7% of the way into the year, and we've consumed 66% of the maintenance and operations budget. And I'm just wondering if that is going to be a problem at all.
I don't anticipate it being a problem. So we did have some of our major expenses coming out early on to make sure that we could get the work done. Last year, we ran into some problems when we asked to roll some of the funds forward. The reasoning behind having to do that is because we ended up not being able to get workers or to get the contract done in a timely fashion. So this year, we've been much more proactive about trying to ensure that we're getting anything that needs to be done within this fiscal year done as soon as possible, that we control in the kind of the normal operating budget. The major R&M, which is going to be a different piece, that is something that's a little bit outside, and we haven't made much of a dent in that yet. But with that in mind, knowing that we did pre-spend and tried to make sure that we got our projects going sooner rather than later.
Okay, so it's a little front end loaded.
Yep.
All right. And one other, on the capital budget, there's 58% of the year remaining, 90% of the budget remaining. It seems like with such a slow start, there's no way we'll consume that budget. Is that?
Yes, you're absolutely right. And that is the budget that is, so right now, Sean is in the process and has been working with Heidi also to bring on a project manager. And once that gets in place, then we've been doing some design sprints in order to actually prioritize the work and get a work plan in place. With an understanding that some of that budget will likely roll over again this coming year, because we know we have a lot of projects that are really big and we need to have the funding in order to start on them, but we haven't been able to get it into a place yet to actually get going. So
Okay.
we are hopefully close to starting on some of those,
Okay.
much closer than we were even a couple months ago. But yes, we haven't spent much of that money.
All right, thank you.
Good question. Any other questions from the board? All right, so with that, it is an action item and looking for an approval, motion, recommendation from the board for the payment of the bills and payroll and the financial reports. They can either be done together or they can be done separately.
I'll move to approve all matters on the consent agenda.
Thank you, Nikki. Do I have a second?
Second.
Nikki, thank you, Bill. All board members in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, none opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Okay, next up, we have the reports, and we have Eileen Oldeg, if I pronounced that correctly, reporting for the Friends. Good morning, Eileen. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. Good morning, everyone. I'm here speaking on behalf of Friends and Jill Johnson, who is out of town. I think last month, Jill had the pleasure of reporting our commitments or contributions for the year to the library. I'd like to update that. At our last meeting, we also voted 2 scholarships. This is a much smaller amount of money than our overall commitment to the library, but it is one of our biggest joys as the board of Friends. 2 of the library staff requested $500 scholarships, both of which go, if I'm remembering correctly, are for actual college courses, and we approved those. If you ever have an opportunity to read grant applications from the staff for scholarships, please do. Our hearts soar when we hear what these staff members want to do and why they want to do it. And it is just a delight to know that we have the quality of staff that we have, not only in expertise, but in their orientation toward community and toward the development of literacy and education opportunities in our community. And it was just an ongoing pleasure to be able to support staff of this caliber in continuing their education and knowing that it's coming back to us through what they'll do in the library. So again, 2 of those at $500. We raised the money to do that through our sales, and we just completed our spring sale. I suspect Jill has probably reported that with COVID, we have had to change our model, our business model, and particularly our sales model. And we are now doing our sales in the auditorium of the main library. We used to have 2 sales a year where we would make $40,000 to $45,000 a sale. Now we are doing 3 auditorium sales a year, and we made $18,385 at the sale that just completed. So we're pleased with that. And of course, as we do continue to adapt to the changes that we've had to make due to COVID and due to loss of physical space, we'll try to increase that ever more. One of the delights in looking over the figures from our spring sale was looking at the memberships that we bring in. So the first evening of this sale, we were able to have a members night where individuals who are members of Friends of the Boise Public Library get first choice at reviewing and purchasing books. I just want to say that I suspect every one of you is a member of Friends of the Boise Public Library, but if you aren't, I hope you'll join us. I hope you'll take advantage of that Friends Night, Members Night, the next time it comes around. We'd love to see you at our sales. We'd certainly like to count you among our members. That's all I have. Happy to entertain questions if you have them.
Fellow board members, are there questions for Eileen?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Eileen, thank you on behalf of the board for all that you and the volunteers do. I was not aware of the scholarships. I don't know if I've missed that in the past or if that is newer, but that is very heartwarming to hear that our staff has the opportunity to, and that we've had several of them put in those requests for the scholarships and they were granted. So that is great to hear. And if you've not had an opportunity to attend the library sales, I know I'm looking at, I know many of us have attended those in the past. They're phenomenal and just incredibly appreciative of all of your efforts to support the library.
Thank you all.
Okay, thank you, Eileen. Hey, next up, we have the foundation. Do I have a representative?
No, no one's on from the foundation.
Oh, okay, this time. Okay. If that changes, Carrie, will you let me know?
I will.
In case I miss that. All right. All right, next up then, we'll move ahead. Jessica, we're ahead of schedule here a little bit on my schedule that she's put together for me. We have the director report.
I'll just build on the, provide a little bit of details with the Friends scholarships. Twice a year, the Friends make a scholarship available to staff of the Boise Public Library, as Elaine said, to further their career or their education. And so we didn't have anybody apply fall of last year, but the previous springs. And so in 2021, the Friends, I think, awarded 3 scholarships and then the 2 this year. And it really is just a wonderful way that the Friends support our staff development and give, an opportunity for staff to really explore new roles and educational opportunities. So we thank them for that. I want to just touch on 2 things really quickly in my time with you. First, I want to talk about the board selection process. We have 3 meetings left with Tanya, which is hard to believe.
Yeah.
But we have right now, the mayor's office has an open call for applications for the board of trustee member. That will close on Friday. So if anybody knows of people who are interested in applying, we have a link in your packet that you can send to them. What will happen next is that the mayor's office will provide myself and Tanya and Phil as vice president a list of the people who have applied and ask us to review applications and think about what skills, experience, and characteristics for the new board of trustee member you would want to see join the board. And what we'll do is put together potential interview questions for the mayor, and then the mayor will interview candidates and make a final selection. But what But we do, what the mayor office does want from you all as board of trustee members is what should they be looking for from your perspective that would be helpful for you as you move forward with a new board member. So I'd love to open that up to hear if you have any thoughts on what you think would be a good addition to you as the four board members whose terms are continuing.
I can start. I'll start. I tried to jot down a few notes here. I think if anything, I have learned on the board, having an inquisitive nature, I think will be very important to not always be status quo. We should be open from a board member perspective, always trying to think about it and look at it from different angles. And I think that will be really important to continue with that. Advocacy to me is a really big thing as well for our library, advocating with our staff, with Jessica's direction as well. I think advocacy around the awareness of how important the library is to our community. It is like the lifeblood of our community. And as board members, we have an opportunity to share that within our own centers of influence, our centers of awareness. And I really feel strongly that board members have to feel comfortable and recognize the value of advocating library services, anything library, to all of those that we speak to within our circle. So I'll kick it off with that. Maybe that can give board members enough time to be thinking about what they would like to add to that as well.
I think I would add to that in that advocacy. It would be great if we had someone who could do that in a very public forum. My own experience is that learning about the library is, it seems much more political than I thought it would be. And I think the director's report this month reflects some of the issues that are at play. And if we had a board member who was able and willing to help advocate in those forums, I think the library would be well served.
Okay, thank you for that, Bill. I believe Nikki had.
I was just going to say diversity, and I think that could be in many different forms, whether it's different backgrounds, different neighborhoods, just so we're representing the city appropriately.
Yeah, I feel similarly with what everyone else has said. Given the recent political nature of some of what we do and who we are, just again echoing that people aren't afraid to speak up in whatever circles that they belong, and that we are, and someone that's committed to the work and the vision and the strategic plan. So knowing, I just think that transparency of what this looks like going forward, and someone that can commit to that work, but particularly the advocacy piece and being vocal that everyone is speaking to.
Thank you, Sonia. Brian.
Great comments. I don't have anything really to add to that. It's a good collection of input.
How would you, if the board has additional feedback, and would you just prefer that like one-on-one?
Oh, sure.
directly to
Yeah.
you?
If you think of something between now and the next meeting, feel free to just send me a note or call me to talk about.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And I do appreciate that that comment about the importance of speaking up and the advocacy. This discussion is very different when I'm thinking back about, we had the same discussion last year about what the board was looking for, and we are in a very different place in terms of the political environment. And you had asked me in my Tanya had asked me in my director's update, what was the result of House Bills, the discussion around House Bill 666, and how has that felt for the library community, particularly for the staff of Boise Public Library. And I think, having people who are speaking publicly and informed about the issues that libraries are facing and how we develop our collections, how we serve our community, making sure that all voices are heard, and how we work with parents to make sure that we've got materials that are appropriate for all children and for all people, and how we use our adult, youth, and children's collections. I think we've got a real need and opportunity to be really more informative, and that's why my staff and I spent a lot of time with the media last month, really helping, trying to educate people about how we develop materials, how we work with our board to make sure we've got a collection that represents the community, and your role in making sure that when materials have a request for reconsideration, you're making sure that we follow appropriate processes. So that was why we put some links in, so you could see some of the work that we've really put some time in, because we need to make sure people are aware of the issues and have confidence in the local decision makers that govern and fund libraries.
Thank you for bringing that up, and I've always appreciated how we go through and talk through different things that are important to the library, but also to our community. As Nikki said, right, we are a very diverse community. Our library reflects our diverse community, and it should, right? It really should. I want all employees to know, though, and our staff and Jessica know, that the board stands behind all of you. It is so important that you know that from us. I know I'm going to feel emotional, and I try not to. But I would ask that the board continue to find ways that we can support our staff in this mission, support our community, but have it with facts, with good information, and be able to identify what does that look like, and how do we, on behalf of the library as the board, how do we advocate, and how do we continue to advocate? What does that future look like? I think Phil nailed it right on the head with, we have to make sure that we're being able to advocate publicly as well, and not just within the board meetings. And that will be really important. I wanted to thank the board, or to thank the staff, because I know it's been a trying time for all of you. So thank you. Anything else on your board?
No, if there's any questions, I'd be happy.
Any questions for Jessica? Hearing none. Thank you for
your
that.
support.
Library director report there. All right, next up is old business with facilities management. This will be an action item, and I saw Chloe on there. Chloe, I believe you are going to kick us off with facilities management piece. Is that correct?
It's correct. I have a couple of slides. Let me share my screen right now, and then I'll kick it back to you. Hopefully everyone can see that okay. Awesome. Great. So thank you for having us for the third and probably final time month in a row. I'm just going to provide an overview of the service level agreement document that was shared and that you've hopefully had a chance to review as part of the board packet that was sent out. Rob and York are also here to field a couple of questions, and then we will move on. So our goal today is to really make sure that the board feels comfortable with that service level agreement prior to the approval of the consolidation that will take place. I just want to highlight that the change would take place October 1st, which is the start of the new fiscal year. And while we're approving the transition today, it will be for the future year. And that is because we are accommodating the budget build process that will be approved by city council in June. So we're just trying to get out ahead of that. I think Eric's probably going to talk about that. But I wanted to just highlight that's why we have been here for 3 consecutive months early on in the year. So this is a slide from last time that just outlines all of the elements of what is included in the service level agreement. As a reminder, this is meant to serve as a guide rather than a document that would cover every single situation that could potentially arise. The goal is to ensure that everyone, board, library staff, as well as the maintenance team, understands what the expectations are and what that bar is, so that responses can be made accordingly. So based on the conversation that we had last month, we got together and updated the agreement to reflect the questions and areas that you felt were missing. We added libraries as a specific building type because of the special nature of the services and the customers that are coming and going on a daily basis. We hopefully clarified the standard service levels per a couple of questions about different levels, and then really called out and clarified some of those standard versus supplemental services that are library specific. And hopefully we reorganized for clarity. In the document you reviewed, we also highlighted those changes, so it was hopefully easier to just go and kind of reference. So I wanted to pause, see if anyone has any questions, make sure we didn't miss anything before we move on for approval.
I reviewed all the changes and they addressed all the topics I brought up for discussion. I think the agreement looks good.
Fabulous, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from board members as you've been reviewing it? It's really good to meet Chloe.
Great. Well, then, thank you. If there's any questions that come up afterwards, we're definitely open and happy to answer those. And then I think what I'm going to do is bump it over to you for the approval process.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chloe.
I will stop sharing.
Yeah, so specifically what we're asking for approval is the FTE. This will transfer 3 FTE from the library staff to facilities. And then it will also transfer, it'll change how, instead of us having that funding, it will move to facilities, and then we will have an indirect that we talked about last month. So this is what we're asking for approval for the FTE move and the change to the budget going forward.
So, just like she said, do I have a motion on the table from the board?
I move that we approve the recommended changes to the facility management agreement for all library locations.
Second,
A second.
beat you to it, Phil.
Was there a question?
No, I was just being a smart aleck. I said I beat Phil to it. Go ahead, sorry.
Nice, Sonia. All right, all board members in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. None opposed, motion carries. Thank you for that lively discussion there. Thank you, Chloe, for all your help, and for Rob. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to come and work through this process with you. So thanks for making it easy.
We appreciate it. Thank you. All right, so next up, we have strategic planning, and we're actually going to kick it off with our main library manager, Heidi. Heidi Lewis is going to provide us an update on the strategic planning process where the library is currently engaged, and then from there, we will have I'll have Phil speak after you.
Great, wonderful, thank you. So a couple of things I want to start with. One is that I don't know if Eileen is still on the line, but I am a former Friends Scholarship recipient over 10 years ago. So thank you to the Friends and Eileen. The other thing I want to share with you is that this is our new strategic plan specific template for our slideshow here. So Jamie Lundergreen in Ops Community Engagement got us this awesome new slideshow just for this project. So we're pretty excited. So thank you for letting me check in with you about this project today. Our next slide is the overview for what we're going to talk with you today. So an overall status update, review the high-level schedule, a steering committee update, work groups update, review board involvement opportunities, and then some next steps. So that's what we'll be talking about today. And the overall status update. So we're very excited. The steering committee had its kickoff meeting on March 22nd. So we've got that under our belt, and we have the second steering committee meeting scheduled for later this month in April, for April 26th. The work group kickoff meetings started last week and are finishing up this week. Friday, we'll have our fourth and final work group kickoff meeting. So we're very excited about that. We've also been doing a lot of in-depth planning with community engagement, and board one-on-ones are finishing up this week. So there's our overall status update. And then checking in on the timeline. So we're hoping to, here, of course, we're in April. Steering committee meetings are happening, work group meetings are happening. We are hoping that later in May is when we'll start to dig into the community, staff, and stakeholder engagement even farther. So we're looking at that. Also, with all of this coordination that we're doing with the Office of Community Engagement, it is a very busy summer in Boise, just in the city itself and in the city of Boise in particular. So we want to make sure that we're coordinating with them, sequencing the timeline with them. What we really want to get is authentic engagement and a real breadth and depth to the engagement. And so that the timeline may need to expand or we'll work with that, and we'll update you on that if there needs to be any changes to that. So we'll check in on that on the timeline. And then this next slide is just to give you a visual of the structure of the strategic plan that we've shared before. And the next couple of the slides, I'm going to mention the steering committee and the work group. So I just wanted you briefly to see how they fit into the overall structure. And then the steering committee update. We shared our outcome goals, which I know we've shared in previous board meetings with you all, that our outcome goal for this project is a library that is outwardly focused on making a positive impact for the community we serve, one system with aligned assets that maximize value to the community. And then we asked the steering committee members a couple of questions to start a discussion. So one question was, how will we know we're successful in turning outward and meeting community needs? And what obstacles will we have to overcome? So these were some of the themes that came out of that discussion. So success of the strategic plan may be directly measurable in some ways, while bigger outcomes will be represented in stories of the library's impact on people's lives. Consider what to measure and how to capture future stories of impact. And then phase one needs to reach a broad representation of the community and not just those who typically participate. And then also COVID has changed how people use the library and offers an opportunity to pivot. It may be difficult to get people's attention as we emerge from COVID and as summer sets in. So that speaks a little bit to that timeline too. We want to be really, really careful with that. So that's my brief steering committee update. I know Vice President Phil will fill in some more information for you all. Here's the work groups update. And we have those 4 work groups. The top is the community engagement work group. Their product for phase 1 will be a communications and engagement plan. So they're actively working on that. They had their meeting on the 5th. Their group is made up of 7 library staff. In all of our work groups, we have people from different divisions throughout the library system, and we really try to get people in different roles. So we have some supervisors in there, we have some part-time staff in there, we have some full-time staff in there, we have librarians and library assistants, and try to get a broad representation for our library system. And then for the library experience, the community partners and the organizational excellence groups, you can see their kickoff dates. All 3 of the 4 have happened. And again, we have that 4th happening on Friday the 15th. And all 3 of those work groups their project for phase one is a white paper detailing baseline conditions, peer benchmarking, and best practices. So all of that communications engagement with the community, all of the white paper information, the research, the analytics, the data, that all culminates to create this summary situation assessment that we'll be bringing back to you and working through with you later in the summer. So that's our work groups update. So we had shared this at our last meeting and talked about who's going to be the steering committee, and I'm also glad to hear that Phil's willing to join us. This time we've got community conversations highlighted or italicized, and that's because we're hoping we'll discuss a little bit, and we've got a discussion question in the next slide. But just wanted to show this again. Here are the different opportunities that we've identified for board members to participate in the strategic plan. So the discussion for today, if it makes sense to you to have today, is we hope to have at least 5 community conversations, 1 per location. And we were wondering if each trustee would be willing to pick one of the locations. We're trying to anticipate how scheduling might happen. And if since there's 5 and 5, then if each person picks a location, that may ease some of the scheduling. We can start with you as an individual, find out your availability, overlay that with public meetings and with the locations meeting room availability. So we wanted to check in with you to see if that's something that you all would be interested in, or if that would work.
Yeah.
Right. There should be a lot. I think there's a lot of nods. Yes.
Okay.
I think fellow board members. So Brian, you're nodding yes.
I'm close to Bound Crossing.
Okay.
Do you want to give locations now? What about you, Nikki?
Yeah, sure. I live in Highlands, but I'm willing to go wherever is needed.
Yes.
Okay.
Wherever you would like to, Amico Crest is probably closest, or Maine, but wherever we would like to place me. Phil, what about you, sir?
So it's a little difficult to hear what's going on in the room. But I'm available for one of those locations, and I don't really care which one.
Okay.
And we'll try to speak up a little bit. Want to make sure that you can hear well. Sonia, what about yourself? Would you be able to attend one of those locations? And if so, what is there a preference?
Absolutely. It doesn't matter to me. I'm excited to participate.
Wonderful.
Is that the answer you were looking for?
That is a great start. We'll follow up to
Okay.
get that sussed out. So thank you. Thank you very much.
And I know that I'm not on the board, but if it's helpful to have a council member at any of those meetings, please reach out, and I'm happy to jump in wherever you think would be helpful.
Wonderful.
That's
Thank you.
great to hear. Thank you.
All right. And then I mentioned this briefly, but that community work group, their next step is to have a draft for the steering committee review. So the steering committee next meets on the 26th of April, and we'll be reviewing that community engagement or communications and engagement plan draft. And then in May update, I'll be back to brief y'all on the communications and engagement plan and the steering committee and work group progress. And that's what I have today.
Any questions for Heidi before I turn it over to Phil on the board?
I have a quick question, Tanya. Has there been discussion about how you reach out to those community conversations to get to people who maybe aren't already engaged with the library, get some of those underserved voices? Or
That's a lot of the work that the community engagement work group will be working on. And it's wonderful because we have a couple of people that are really dialed into the office of community engagement. So they'll be able to use some of the tactics they've used with other types of projects for the city of Boise. But yeah, that's absolutely very much in our mind. We know that we'll probably be in a lot of people that we typically expect to participate, but we really want other people who may not have participated before.
Right.
That's
Great.
great. If you have any ideas, please let us know.
I'll think about it.
Definitely work on it. Yeah, thank you.
Really good question.
Thank you.
All right. Not hearing any other questions for Heidi. Thank you. It's Heidi. We appreciate that update. Phil, as our board representative on the steering committee, I believe you have some feedback and update for us as well.
So when we decided that I would participate, on the steering committee, I wanted to make a commitment that I would keep the board members informed of what was going on. And right now, I don't have a lot to add, in that I think the team's done a good job of communicating the overall plan, which was mostly what was talked about in the steering committee as well. So I think the board has the same information I have at this point. I think nearly everybody has been through the interviews, which I think was very informative for me, made me think about things a bit. As a note, I'm not sure exactly yet how I'm going to fulfill this commitment to communicate, particularly to communicate early, because in discussions with the city legal department, their opinion is that the options that a board member has for communications are extremely limited. And I would say overbearingly limited. So most of our, certainly all of our discussion has to take place in the board meeting. And it appears right now that even communication has to take place in the board meeting. So I'm trying to navigate that, but I still will do my best to keep everybody informed of what's going on. So that was really all I had today. Hopefully there'll be more later.
All right, thank you for that, Phil. I do recognize that it does have to be in a public forum, and we do have to abide by that. And I know we always get really great guidance from our legal representative here as well. So we will look forward to the feedback that you're able to provide in our upcoming board meeting with your, as a board representative on the steering committee, in conjunction with Heidi's reports. As well. So thank you. All right, thank you. Any questions for Phil at this time? All right, thank you, Phil. Thank you, Heidi. All right, so next up we have Sarah Kelly Chase, and Sarah, it's that time for our library policy review, which is great to break this down. I think that how we do this is incredibly important and easy for us to be able to digest it throughout the year. So I know you're going to share some good information here that we've been reviewing as an action item.
Yes. And I had some confusion because of the nature of this section. There were some decisions we actually made last fiscal year that had already been enacted as of October 1. So this actually isn't an action item. We're not recommending any changes at this time, but there had been some changes we already updated that you had approved. Hence my policy summary, trying to kind of follow the bouncing ball of what we had already covered, why something else was changed. We brought something to you early in the fiscal year because we wanted to make a better experience for our customers. So with that, so that's the first 4 sections of policy in 4.0, and we're not recommending any changes. Does anyone have any questions?
I had just a couple thoughts.
Yeah.
In 4.01, the last sentence of the first paragraph recites the groups enjoying federal legal protection against discrimination. And it occurred to me that you could just say services to all patrons will not be denied or abridged, unless they violate the rules of conduct in 4.04A.
So trying to kind of group, and that would, I would check in probably with legal if we need to lay out individuals, or if we can put it in a.
There's some legal requirement to state our observation of the legally protected group status.
And so the request would be to eliminate that. And I mean, I guess what would be the benefit of it? So
just that we're not going to deny or abridge service to anyone unless they fail to observe the rules of conduct of the library.
So in my experience, they're usually listed out as part of like backup for your like EEO policy or statements, so I'm a little bit more comfortable having them listed personally.
Okay. And I have one other question. Do we still provide much in the way of fax services?
It's very rare. I don't know, many of our locations have eliminated a physical fax machine. However, we do have one for the public now, which does get used, but it's incorporated into a scanner system. So it wasn't an additional piece of equipment, but yeah, it's very rare.
All right, in 4.03, there's a lot of talk of faxes, possible update, but not urgent. That's it.
Thank you. Any other questions for Sarah? Good feedback, thank you. Okay, new business. I see Eric on here from Boise City Department of Finance and Administration Budget Manager. So you were going to be updating us, sir, shed some light for us on the financial forecast and budget process. So welcome.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the opportunity to be with you this afternoon. I'm going to just do a brief overview of where we stand in the citywide budget process. I have some slides, and I'm going to attempt to share them. And can everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Great. So I'll first kind of talk a little bit about what we're trying to accomplish through the annual budget process. Really, you know, at the highest level, it's to try and align funding for the next year with the city's current values and priorities. We do not reset the entire budget for the entire organization each year through the budget process. When we look at the budget, and you'll see that a little bit more clearly on a subsequent slide, that the majority of our expenditure budget is dedicated towards ongoing expenses, primarily people. So we do take an incremental budget approach. Through the budget process, we seek to ensure that we have adequate funds to support all of our planned and ongoing costs. We adjust for the ongoing costs. So the incremental adjustments for all those ongoing costs. We also update all of our revenue estimates to ensure that they reflect any anticipated changes. And then, probably at the most basic level, we resolve any differences between anticipated revenues and expenses. So if we have, more projected revenue than expenses, we figure out how to allocate that. If we have less revenue than expenses, we figure out how to bring those back into alignment. So, we are still very much in the process of developing fiscal year 2023 budget. So I'm going to do just a brief look back at the current year's adopted budget, just to give a flavor of how funds are allocated. The FY22 budget totaled just over $660 million. And there's 4 categories that those funds are allocated between our general fund, our capital funds, enterprise funds, and other funds. I'll do a quick overview of each. So the general fund, this is where we account for our general governmental services. And you can think public safety services, parks and recreation, as well as the library. The primary funding source for our general fund is taxes. So property tax, sales tax, liquor tax, and then we have other things that go into this, like departmental revenues, development fees, so on and so forth. The next bucket would be our capital funds. This is where we account for infrastructure or capital costs associated with general government functions. So whereas the general fund would be looking at the people and supplies related to public safety, library, parks, this would be looking at the facilities. So the fire stations, the library buildings, so on and so forth. These are primarily supported by taxes and development impact fees. We have our enterprise funds, so our airport fund, solid waste, water renewal, and geothermal. Those are primarily supported by users of those services. And we account for both our operating and capital expenses for those functions within our enterprise funds. And then we have, kind of a catch-all other funds, which would include things like our debt service fund, risk and workers' compensation funds, health, housing, and fleet. I'll now focus just a little bit on our general fund. And as you look at the general fund, you can see that just over 60% of overall revenues are derived from property taxes, with the next largest buckets being department revenue and sales tax. If you look to the right of this slide, you can see the city's ability to impact change within any one of these categories. So, development fees, I guess to some degree, things can move, but it's really more driven by growth out in the community and what is, what's being built. Our sales tax, we have zero ability to impact that because sales tax is collected at the statewide level and then distributed per formula to cities within the state. And we don't have the ability to, charge more or less when it comes to sales tax. Fines and forfeitures, two primary things that you'd think about there would be parking tickets, as well as traffic citations. We used to account for overdue materials within this category, but since we're no longer charging for overdue materials, that's not a big portion of that category. Franchise fees, those are set, with 20-year terms. And we have, they're really based on utilization of water, cable, electricity, gas, so, various utilities. Internal charges and departmental revenue, very low. Property tax is something that gets a lot of attention on an annual basis. The city can make a determination to charge up to 3% higher than the last year. And that's something that the city council looks at each year. And then liquor tax, similar to sales tax, is collected by the state and distributed to cities. When you look at the city's budget from an expenditure standpoint, and I alluded to this earlier, you can see that just about 2/3 of the overall budget is dedicated towards personnel. And we assume that all of the authorized people that constitute our budget are going to be here with us ongoing. Otherwise, we would just create limited duration or temporary positions. So you can see that, about 2/3 for personnel, about 16% for maintenance and operations. I like to think about that as being just, supplies and non-personnel type expenses related to running the city. About 6% dedicated towards our debt service transfer. That amount was a little bit inflated for fiscal year 22 because we made a conscientious effort to try and retire some debt early. And then we make an annual transfer to our capital fund. You can see that at 6.6%. The other thing I'll draw attention to is that slice of the pie, 3.1% for VRT. The city contributes a significant amount towards public transportation, an amount equivalent to about 5% of our property tax budget. If you break apart our expenditures in the general fund by department, you can see that over half of our budget is dedicated towards public safety departments, 51%, parks and recreation at about 14%. Some of our internal support functions, human resources, legal, finance, and IT at about 13%. And up in the top left, you can see the library making up about 5% of the city's general fund budget. So now as we look forward to developing the fiscal year 23 budget, I'll just bring it all up because I think it's come up right. We do expect that we will be in a positive position as we build out fiscal year 23. As we look into the outer years of our forecasts of fiscal year 2024 and beyond, we're anticipating positive figures, but maybe with not as much flexibility as we might have in this upcoming year, based on the fact that growth outpaces or expenditure growth outpaces revenue. There are numerous factors which will influence our net position in any given year. And you can look, think about things like our overall economic climate. So if we were to go into a recession, we don't necessarily have the ability to influence change on some of those revenue categories, like I referenced earlier, sales tax and liquor tax, but they would certainly reduce should we hit a recession. We've seen that in prior recessions. We've seen the legislature impacting some of our revenue streams over the course of the last several years, reducing the amount of growth, reducing the ability of growth to pay for growth when it comes to property tax, making changes to sales tax formula. So if there were to be further impacts on our revenue streams, that would obviously change our bottom line position. I referenced the fact that the city council can choose to take up to 3% growth on our property tax. So, depending on what decisions are made in future years, our forecast could look a little bit different. COVID, we saw pretty dramatic impacts over the last couple of years. And depending on, how quickly that goes away, for good, we could continue to be in and out of impacts, labor costs and staff growth, and then continued inflation. I'll touch on some of the themes that we're looking at specific to fiscal year 23. So, we're looking at property tax. We're looking at a new tool which was made available as of this past legislative session at the statewide level that allows cities to provide a rebate program for community members that take advantage of the circuit breaker program. And for those that might not be aware of what that circuit breaker program is, it effectively provides relief to members of the community that might not have as many resources as others and might have difficulty in paying their property tax bill. That is a state-funded function. And up until this year, there was no ability for cities to further aid in reducing the property tax burden. There is an option going forward. Also, the mayor has directed us to explore options for taking less than the 3% growth in recognition of, some of the financial issues that are facing our community, and we're looking at that. We're seeking to address community priorities as part of the upcoming budget process, and this is not a comprehensive list, but you can think about things like housing, pathways, climate, and transportation. And we're looking particularly using some of the one-time funding that is being made available to the city. One of those one-time funding streams being the American Rescue Plan. The city was awarded approximately $37 million through that plan. And we're looking to make headway in certain community priorities with that. We're seeking to stabilize the workforce to ensure high quality service delivery to the community. You may have seen in the news various articles about high vacancy levels being experienced at the city. And I know that's not unique to the city. It's, in many other employers are feeling that as well. But to the degree that we have high vacancy levels, we're not necessarily able to fully execute all the services that the community demands. So we're looking at ways to stabilize the workforce and then, responding to challenges associated with growth and inflation. I'll hit on those two very briefly. So as we look at growth, You know, we know that the community, the Treasure Valley, City of Boise continues to expand, as does service demands. You can see on the right-hand side what population is looking like, both within the City of Boise and Ada County. And for both of those categories, or, you know, within both those boundaries, population is just steadily going up, which is driving demand for services like police, fire, parks, and associated parks maintenance, the library, obviously, planning and development, housing, and then some of those other functions that help make the city go on a daily basis, like human resources and IT.
You have time for a question?
Absolutely.
Do you have any projections for what those population numbers will be in 5 or 10 years?
I do have those. We most recently went through an update to our development impact fee study, and we worked with Compass to come up with 10-year projections. I don't have those as a percentage at
Oh, we lost you, Eric.
We can't hear you, Eric. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay. It looks like Eric.
It looks like
is
Eric's
frozen.
frozen.
Yeah.
What to say?
No, but I was waiting for it.
So while he unfreezes, I'm not sure what the latest update was, but we expected to hit a little over 1 million people just before 2050. That was in 2019. And that's the major metropolitan planning area as a whole. And so my guess is it's probably a little bit sooner than that we're anticipating hitting 1 million people. And the major metropolitan planning area really being including Meridian and Nampa areas as well. I don't know if that's helpful as Eric pops back on. And I'll see if I can't track down an updated version of that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Halliburton. We appreciate your quick response on that information. Well, hopefully Eric will be able to rejoin us. What we'll do at this point, should we go ahead and go into this number C then?
Yeah, let's go to number C.
Okay.
So this is moving from FY 23, we're going back to FY 22.
Yes, so the interim fiscal year 2022 budget changes, we're gonna navigate and go to 7C. And here we're going to hear from Carrie Davis and Kathy Stedler.
Yes.
Recommendations.
Okay, trustees, yeah, we have before you some interim budget changes that we would like approval to take forward to council. We do have in here an interim budget change is usually an off-cycle request. So we've already had our established budget, and now we're going to go forward and ask for some additional one-time funding that the city has stated that we have. It goes through a process of departments, they identify their need. And then from here, the budget office will perform any necessary diligence and prepare a narrative to go forward to the mayor's office. Then the mayor's office will review the request, and it goes to our executive management team at the city. And the executive management team will then offer their final recommendations to city council. Should you approve these today, these would go before the city council on May 10th. We have two capital items that we would like to request additional funding on, and we have a general fund. The two capital are major equipment. One is to replace the furniture at the downtown library. We had originally, of course, had a plan that we would be replacing some furniture here with a new project, but that did not happen. So the furniture replacement had been put on hold. We, at this point, have furniture that is actually breaking underneath some of our users. The furniture is pretty old, some of it as much as 30 years old. So we're requesting the funds so that we can replace the furniture on all 3 floors of the building. The other item that's capital that we are seeking funding for is a mobile lactation pod that can be moved around to our different branch locations. We, as the city, has a employee policy that we provide a space for nursing mothers, and we know that we do have a situation at a branch where we need to have one of these pods. And we had a current pod, but it was not able to be a size that could be moved to the other location. So we'd like to request this funding so we can go ahead with that purchase. The other item we have on here is the purchase of a block of the Idaho Statesman Historical Archive that we're missing. It's the only block that we're missing. We can only get this through Newsbank, and it is a one-time cost of $123,000. It's kind of expensive, but they're the only place that we can get it through. The Idaho Statesman, of course, is the newspaper of archive here in the city. So that is why we're seeking that appropriation. And right now, I believe that people would have to search on microfilm. Right now we do have a little bit of the vendor is allowing us to have access, but that could be taken at any moment because we're not actually paying for it. So we would like the opportunity to purchase it so that we would not have that situation happen. If it did, our users would have to go back to using microfilm as opposed to right now they can use it online and search it.
And the vendor is the Idaho State
The vendor is Newsbank, actually.
Newsbank.
Yeah.
Okay.
So those are what we are bringing before you, those 3. The capital requests amount to $132,630 one-time cost, and the newspaper, the general fund is $123,000 one-time cost.
Is it possible to purchase directly from the Idaho Statesman as opposed to the Newsbank?
They don't even have it digitized. They don't have access to it themselves in any search format. So they actually come here and use the microphone if they need it. And we don't have, there's no index. So it's not like it's searchable. You have to have an idea of when something happened and what you're looking for to be able to then pull that bit of microphone and go through. It's been an ongoing situation, negotiation. But, yeah.
We think we got the best deal we're gonna get.
Yes. I do. I did see some numbers that maybe I shouldn't have seen from some other entities, and we are getting a better deal per population than others have. So I feel confident what we've been quoted at. And on top of that, we do get perpetual access to it. So we're buying the content, but we're then also getting a hard drive of the content. We've worked into our negotiations with them, and that is our archival copy, which we can then make accessible in a searchable format to our users if we ever were to break with Newsbank, or they were to sell or not be in business, or whatever the case is. So we're getting the digitization and perpetual access at the same time, which is part of why it's so expensive.
Sorry, that also. They have a question. Knowing that a lot of the digital materials, we have a limit of how many times our users can access it before we have to pay again. With that digital hard drive that would be provided, would we have that limitation, or it's ours for?
It's ours.
In indefinite use with our patrons?
Yes.
Okay.
It would be limited to in-house, so they would need to be at one of our library facilities in order to search it. But that is actually larger access than the current microfilm that we have, which is only here. And you have to have the machines in order to access it as well, which that technology is getting harder to keep up with as well.
And in perpetuity for any number of users is the same as the parts of the collection we already have, the Idaho Statesman collection we already have.
Yes, there is. So up until 1998, at 1999, we have access in a searchable online format. We do not have perpetual access to that. That would be another, I think they quoted us at 320 some thousand to buy that remainder of the content up through 2019. In 2019, we started to get the digital microfilm is what they call it, which is, I know, a little backwards, but so we get a hard drive of the content for the previous year, every year. So annually from 2019, we do have perpetual access to that on a hard drive. If we were to sever ties with Newsbank, we would not have access from 1999 to 2019 in a perpetual. So we do have some risk associated with that. This is the only piece that we don't have searchable access to currently if they were to remove our access. So we pay them an annual amount to subscribe to the 1999 to current. We pay them another annual amount for the digital archive of the previous year's content.
Okay. Thank you.
So it sounds like there's been some significant vetting of this opportunity, and this is our best option forward.
We did, yes, we looked into digitizing it ourselves, and that was even more expensive than purchasing it through Newsbank. So, and the content would not be as well done. So Newsbank is actually doing quite a good job of trying to make the content readable, accessible in the digital format. Our microfilm is degrading, and so we cannot take that and get a good quality digitization off of it in the same way that we can get it through Newsbank. So there isn't a meaningful way for us to do it ourselves either, which we did look into.
Well, thank you for those efforts of really trying to better understand what our options were to present to the board and to the city ultimately. Any other questions for Carrie or Kathy from my fellow board trustees? Okay. So this is an action item. So we are looking for a motion to approve the recommended items and forward to council, city council for consideration on these 3 areas to be requested. So do I have a motion from the board to approve?
I move to approve the recommended interim fiscal year 2022 budget changes and forward to council for consideration.
Okay, thank you, Nikki. Do I have a second?
Second motion.
All right, thank you, Brian. All board members in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, none opposed. Motion carries. Thank you, fellow board. Thank you, Kathy and Carrie, for bringing that to our attention with the thorough discussion around that. I appreciate that very much. Some great questions, great opportunities. So hopefully we'll get that passed. It looks like we have Eric Villamoria back. Sorry, technical difficulties I know can be a challenge, but we're so glad that you have joined us back. And so we look forward to reconvening with you.
Yeah, really, my apologies here. I've just been having network issues the last couple of weeks here. So, and I was almost done. And I see that there was a response to the questions about growth. Thank you very much, Councilmember Halliburton. And if there's any further questions, you know, I can work to try and help with those. So I think we talked about growth, and then inflation is something that's certainly, impacting, really everyone in the community and impacting the city as well. So I mentioned earlier looking at potentially a circuit breaker expansion program to provide property tax relief. So looking at that, we're evaluating compensation levels to aid in recruitment and retention, again, to ensure that we can provide high quality services. We're seeing our capital projects cost more and more, basically by the day. So we're aiming to try and catch up and get ahead of that by addressing rising costs within our budget. In terms of our maintenance and operations for fiscal year 23, we have not included growth, with the primary reason for that being that generally across the organization, we are seeing high vacancy levels. And with those high vacancy levels, we have not been spending our annual budget allocation. So we didn't grow in response to inflation for fiscal year 23, but I have assumed, in outer years that we're going to have to catch up with this inflation. So I have built that in future years. Ideally, once we get past some of these struggles around vacancies. And then, certain things that, many folks might not think about, but, fuel is costing the city a lot more. So we're looking at things, this is more illustrative, but we're looking at things like creating a fuel contingency to address the volatility that we're all experiencing. And then in terms of process, a couple of weeks ago, we provided kind of a kickoff discussion at the city council level to talk about many of the things we just talked about here. And then we held a budget interactive out at the library, at Hillcrest Library, and that was, I think, positively received for folks to come and talk to council members about concerns regarding the budget and their ideas and thoughts. In terms of what's coming up next, we'll be doing a budget workshop next month where departments will come and talk about potential funding opportunities with the city council. We're going to release our budget itself in the month of June, and then subsequent to that have a more comprehensive budget workshop at the tail end of June. We'll have an opportunity for the public to review both the budget document as well as provide feedback between June and July 19th, which is when we have our annual public hearing. And then we aim for adoption of the budget at the tail end of August. So that's, kind of the budget in a nutshell. I'd be happy to answer any additional questions that you folks might have.
Fellow board members, are there questions for Eric?
No.
Well, Eric, it sounds like you did a great job of explaining that process. Really appreciate seeing how the city, how the budget process and how it's looked at. I learned a few things myself today, so it was really very informative, and I appreciate your time coming and sharing that with us.
And thanks for providing materials in advance. The various links were very helpful.
Wonderful. And I'm happy to join in any future meetings if there's any other information you'd like to hear.
We appreciate that. We may take you up on that in the future, Eric. So appreciate your collaboration with us in this process. Thank you for joining us today.
Bye-bye.
Okay, next up,
Before we leave this 2023 budget process, I had one suggestion, I guess. There's a calendar, looks like it's library, it's not Eric's calendar, it's a library calendar in the notes. And there are actually two steps related to the 2023 budget that occur afterwards. One is requests for changes, which we just had one for 2022. But the calendar might say requests for changes come during the fiscal year. And the more important thing I'm worried about is there was a fiscal year 21 year-end budget report in December that came up. And we were kind of caught by surprise. I don't know about Nikki, but me for my newness. And it created a little confusion in the board meeting. Remember, we almost failed to approve it because we didn't feel comfortable understanding the numbers. And it seems like that would be a helpful thing to have so that we're all aware that there's a next step. Issuing a report, what happened with the budget.
okay. Thank you for that feedback. It's really good feedback. All right, so next up, that's a great segue then into the fiscal year. So section 7B under new business, we have the fiscal year 2023 library budget. And we will be having both Carrie Davis and Kathy Stoller presenting to us today.
Yes, kind of piggybacks on some of the things that Eric talked about. So as part of our FY23 budget update, as part of the annual process, the library, as part of the city, we build a balanced budget. And through this process, we don't reset the entire budget. We actually instead go through an exercise of ensuring that there's sufficient funds available to support any of our planned and ongoing costs. And then we analyze and adjust any costs for ongoing services and resolve any differences that we see between anticipated revenues and expenses. As Brian just pointed out, we do have a timeline on that sheet and on the update that we put in your packet. The next thing that we will actually bring to the board will be on May 11th. We will discuss the draft FY23 budget. And then on June 8th, we will bring to you an approval of the budget and to go forward to council. Eric covered the city's priorities. He mentioned that as part of the considering four themes that the city's looking at property tax relief, community priorities, stabilizing our workforce to ensure that we have high quality service delivery to our community and responding to growth and inflation. So for FY23, we've been asked to look, we were asked to look internally to see about reallocating any of our budget lines if we've seen areas that we have underspend, to reallocating those to areas that we may need to balance, and to see where we have maybe greater need in that budget. And each department is going to start with initially a flat maintenance and operating budget. There won't be an increase from last year. If we have any, what we'll have is an opportunity then to request any additional budget we should need to respond to any of our strategic business reasons. And those can be one time or they can be ongoing. Our priorities in reviewing our FY22 budget and in drafting the FY23 budget would be, we're going to be looking at improving access to new materials, increasing our programming and in-person services, and providing safe and welcoming facilities for public and staff. Other general fund trends that we are going to be, that will be impacting us, we do know we're going to have an increase in our Links Consortium reimbursements because we're going to be adding we're requesting to add an ILS discovery layer. We also should see an increase in our career reimbursement because we're going to be adding Meridian has a location that we'll be adding. So we know that we'll have some cost increase, but we'll also see some reimbursement increase. We'll see facility rental increases also because we just this past year had you approved those Learning Lab and Step Ahead Idaho leases. So that we'll see an increase in that revenue. We also know we'll see some decrease in our copier revenue. We just don't have people using our copiers like they used to, and they do have an option of scanning things. And so a lot of people are choosing that option as well. And then our maintenance and operating budget, some trends that we are seeing that will be affected by is the centralization of the FSO that you just approved earlier in this meeting. And that we know that we'll have increased costs for materials and services. So these are basically the things that we're looking at as we are drafting this new FY23 budget that we will be bringing back to you to look at the draft copy next month. Are there any questions?
I have a nitpicky question that maybe I should know. What is the ILS discovery layer? I just didn't. Oh,
yeah.
That's
great.
Oh, boy.
Then we know now, right?
It's not nitpicky at all, because it costs us a lot of money, and that is actually a lot of the reason why we have a consortium is the cost sharing, because it's so expensive. So it is the system that runs all of our business as a library for the most part. So it has all of our library users in it, barcodes, has all of our collection in it, so check in and out. It has all of our, we have an additional layer of how we track the budget, and that's within that as well. So we get down into a much more detailed layer of where we're spending and how much on materials using that ILS. So it does all the different layers. And when Carrie's mentioning the discovery layer, that would be something that we would bring on in addition to what we already have as kind of baseline for users to be able to access the catalog. And it would make it more user friendly. So when somebody's searching for something, it would make it so they wouldn't see as many. You wouldn't have all the different records laid out. You would have one roll up and it would have all the formats. So it's easier to find what you're looking for. Definitely more intuitive. It would have more of that responsiveness of, oh, did you mean, instead of I misspelled this by one letter and I did nothing. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. And all of that plays together with the integrated library system. It's very exciting.
It deals with just titles, or does it do content search also?
It does content search also. So if you're doing a keyword search, it will help you bring up some of the content that's associated. Discovery layer, if we could get that piece, that does a better job of it. Right now, it's a little bit rudimentary, so you can type in different types of terms, and it doesn't have the greatest functionality in bringing back what you're really looking for or hoping to find.
I've definitely experienced that as
Yes.
a user, so I can appreciate how that would be a benefit.
I like it. Those are good questions.
Yeah.
What, any other questions from my fellow trustees? Thank you, ladies, for that informative discussion. That's really helpful for us to be able to refer back to as well and look at where we're going forward in the process. So thank you for the timeline and the suggestion for Brian as well. That is towards the end. Okay, before we go on section 8, I just wanted to circle back under the library director report earlier. It was noted that our fellow trustee Brian had attended 4 of our branch locations recently, and so he graciously agreed to talk about his experience or feedback with anything that you would want to share with the board from your experience, sir.
Was really fun. For starters,
It always is.
getting to see things that you talk about but don't really understand. When I left Boise the first time, 1998, I can't recall that there were any locations other than the main location. So there were no branches. When I came back, there were all these branches. So it was a bit of a discovery for me, an opportunity. They all look really well run, efficiently run, adequately staffed. The security addition, I think, was a good addition. People are present, but they're not, overtly present. In other words, unless they're needed. Otherwise they function sort of as a library staff supplemental person. The big takeaway for me was that each library has to be customized a little bit because the nature of the community that they're situated in has different needs. And it's not just one library for all. It's a unique library for that segment of the population that surrounds that library location. I mean, it can be quite different. I got to understand all the programs being offered, see some of them in action. We actually went to a park for a storybook hour, 4-year-olds, which helped me with some ideas for my grandchildren. I really enjoyed the day. And, I recommend it to my fellow trustees as opportunity arises if you haven't already.
Thank you for obliging me in that question. And you bring up a really good observation in the way of that each location adapts to the community of which it's located. And that, again, really speaks to the relevancy of our staff, our teams at the library locations, and really trying to find what does that community in the immediate surrounding community need and want from our library, our locations. So that is great to hear. Thank you for sharing. Okay, next up is the selection of trustee to review payment vouchers, and that is myself. So yes, Carrie, I have no issue that I will get you all taken care of there. Our next meeting date is Wednesday, May 11th. Do I have any board members that would be unable to attend on May 11th? Sounds like we're doing good. So May 11th will be our next regular meeting. And then at this point, we are going to move into the executive session, and I believe Nikki is going to help us get there with verbiage.
Sure, I move that under provisions of Idaho Code Section 74-206(1)(b), this board recess to an executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel matters, and that a roll call be taken on this motion.
Oh, second.
Galavis.
Yes.
Lenny,
Yes, here.
Magnuson,
Yes.
Pantera,
Yes.
Westonsko.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carried.
Madam Chairman, before you go behind, can I make a couple comments before you go into the executive session? I didn't get on the agenda, I wasn't sure how to do it.
I would probably work with, who should I recommend? Be on the future
Yeah, I didn't.
No need for me to hop onto the executive session. Have a good one, everybody.
All right,
Thanks,
thank you,
Jamie.
Jamie.
If you're interested in making a comment on your communication, you can send it to the board director.